Hi, Tia,
Hello. Long
and
time
hello.
no see.
Long time no see, and
Well,
hello, everyone in the audience. I'm sure you missed the regular RegInt episodes, right?
I know I have, although, to be honest, with the amount of free time that I have, I'm not missing the additional work, but definitely missing the format.
But like, what are you currently working on? I have no idea. Like, you're not writing a book, right? So
No, no. Where did you
not at
get
all.
that idea? So yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard, but Peter and I are writing a book. It's going to be cool. It's going to first be published in German, but then also in English, hopefully, sometime soon, once we finish it.
It's a
But
lot of work, yeah. But
we
it's
are
also
working hard. Yeah.
it's also rewarding. They always say that like work is rewarding. We'll see
Yeah.
about that. But the
I'm
initial
gonna I'm
feedback,
gonna wait till the book is finished, and then I will judge if it
right?
was
But the
rewarding.
initial feedback from a couple of our colleagues is already promising. So they said like, what are we actually talking about? We didn't understand a single word. So that means it must have some value, carry some value. Anyway, Tia, this is a special episode, and it is special because we do not have papers, we do not have actual guests, but we do have a special situation because you were in Venice a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it's also special for a couple of other reasons, to be fair. First of all, I'm not wearing my glasses. That's very special.
Right, we notice.
I do occasionally wear contact lenses, yeah. Second reason why it's special, or, well, you already gave two, so fourth reason, we don't have the brand. I'm kind of sad about that one. But that does take a lot of prep time. So, anyways, four reasons why it's
World is
special.
crazy enough. Sorry, the world is
Word is
crazy
crazy.
enough.
Yeah, the world has not become any less crazy. But I was in Venice now already a month ago, which kind of demonstrates how busy we actually are since we haven't done this yet. But I was in Venice and I had the wonderful opportunity to sit down at one of the canals and talk to Leila Golchehreh. Now, I met Leila in Brussels, which was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before Venice. And we hit it off, and I really liked what she was saying about her whole experience. So Leila had extensive international experience as a privacy lawyer, did a lot of work for all the big companies, Workday, Adaptive Insights, stuff like that, and then decided to quit it all and go build a product that she was missing while working as a lawyer for the big companies. And so she did that, and she is now one of the co-founders of Reliance AI. And so I was really excited about her story. I'm all for women entrepreneurship. And I asked her if she would be up for an interview when we meet each other again in Venice. And she graciously said yes. So we do have a wonderful recording of us sitting over a glass of Aperol Spritz in Venice.
I've already seen it, so it's a great interview. And without further ado, I hope you will enjoy the interview. And Tia, any last words?
Any last words? Next episode, hopefully, probably in our regular format, somewhere towards the end of August. We will announce it through our newsletter once we actually set the date. But we do have a topic, we do have some guests in mind, so stay tuned.
Cool. Really looking forward to participating and preparing it. And now enjoy the interview. And goodbye. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Okay, so are we on? We are on. So
I'm super excited to be here in Venice. We are currently at the Privacy Symposium, which has been taking place this whole week in this gorgeous town that looks kind of like a fairy tale or a simulation. I'm still not sure. And I'm super glad that we can have a very special episode of our RegInt podcast with Leila Golchehreh, who has done so many things in her life that I'm kind of having a hard time keeping track, but who is currently the founder and CEO,
Chief Strategy
Officer, so CSO,
Yes.
of Reliance AI, legal tech company based in San Francisco.
Yes.
And before that, she did, as I said, a whole bunch of things that I'm going to interrogate her on. But to begin with, let's drop the mic to you and, let us know what you're doing in Europe, what you're doing in Venice before we get into the whole, tech and law dilemmas, problems,
Sure.
issues.
Well, at the outset, thank you so much for having me, Taya. I think the world of you and everything that you and the firm are building. So it's really a pleasure and delight to be here, and I'm honored to have the invitation. So what am I doing in Europe? Well, I am here kind of wearing a multitude of hats, one of which is with a company that I co-founded, Reliance AI. We have a privacy and AI governance technology solution that really embeds as a technology co-pilot in order to help automate and build many aspects of a privacy and data governance program. So I was a chief privacy officer and privacy lawyer for 16 years, and I looked at all technology on the market in order to help me with some of the work that I was doing, and largely I couldn't find anything that met my needs. Everything I found was really manual. It was out of date the moment it was done. It felt like I was just sending a lot of forms and surveys, and it didn't feel like real deep technology. And I realized, because I grew up with parents of two different cultural backgrounds, they spoke two different languages, different religions in our household. So, and anytime there was a miscommunication, it often was a translation issue. And I realized that a lot of the conversations that I was having as a head of privacy or chief privacy officer or DPO were largely miscommunication issues. Engineers were sort of on one planet, or as the former chief privacy officer of Adobe said, engineers are from Mars, privacy is from Venus. I feel like there's a lot of accuracy to that statement. And I realized that our common language was really code. And this is exactly why I wanted to build a company around solving for these issues. If only we could translate what was happening in the technology stack through code, then we would have this great opportunity to really understand how personal data was flowing through our systems, who was accessing that data, what was being done to it. So it's really been an honor to have been able to build a new product that would have changed, frankly, my entire career as a privacy professional.
Okay, that sounds amazing, and that's also part of the reason why I have you sitting here with me, because that is something that I feel very deeply, like the lack of communication and the efforts to do that. And that's also why it makes perfect sense for you to be in Europe for the month of May, because, I mean, there's just one conference after the other, and the whole thing we do is talk the whole day about different issues that are bothering us and trying to find solutions to some of the issues that are bothering us. So it actually all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing some of your story with us. We are going to get more into that later. But first, you maybe flip it around a bit to the question of conferences and how you think about, well, one thing that has something to do with your product, but not necessarily directly. So yesterday and today, as I learned in the pre-talks to this talk, there was a person saying that we don't need more regulation, we need more technology to solve the problems of technology. And now as a lawyer, I kind of always get very puzzled with what I think about that. I definitely agree with the part that we don't need more regulation, but solving tech problems with tech is also something that I'm not sure I can fully support.
Sure.
Especially when I look at most of the products available out there. So maybe share your thoughts on that. Do we need more tech? Do we need more regulation? And how can tech help solve us tech problems?
Yes, it's a really great question, Thea, and I think I've heard that a few times, including from the Italian regulator from the Garanti today. He said, even though some of the things he was saying, I think from an implementation point, will be quite difficult for technology companies, he did say that the way to protect society from technology is through technology itself. So it looks like that is kind of one of the themes of the privacy symposium here in Venice, which I think is really important. I agree with that. I mean, we are at a stage of an AI renaissance at the moment. We are seeing large language models, new AI models being adopted at breakneck speed. To think that we can use sort of the old ways of working as lawyers to continuously interview engineers and ask them what they're doing, and then use a paper pushing exercise to say this is how personal data is being held, is just not going to work anymore. If we really want to build compliance, privacy, AI governance, and security programs that we can trust, it's essential that we use technology to embed in the technology stack. So I used to work a little bit in litigation, IP litigation, and that was actually my foray into privacy. I was at Allen & Overy, and in litigation, we can't rely on hearsay, right? We can't just rely on what someone tells us about what they're doing with data. Instead, we have to go to the source of truth, verify this information for ourselves. Now, I think what we've been doing in privacy is continuously, let me interview someone, get their take on what may or may not be happening, and then from that point is exactly when we'll put up some paper and say that this is how data is being processed. But the problem with this is, and even though this has been our good faith effort of doing so, is that no matter how time consuming it is, no matter how expensive it is, and by the way, this is also not great for business, because we are now disrupting innovation by stopping engineering teams and asking them to explain to us what they're doing all the time. The real solution is through technology. I definitely believe it's also the problem, so no doubt about that, but it's also very much the solution. It's critical that we find ways of embedding technology for privacy, for data protection, for data governance, and especially AI governance into the technology stack. And to the extent that we can embed effectively, this is how we're going to have really holistic understandings of what's going on within the technology environment.
Yeah, right, because it sounds kind of illogical at first, but then again, we are dealing with processes that are so complex that they're beyond understanding of most average persons. And we already know that the engineers have a very difficult time explaining in, lawyer language what they are actually doing. And that's beside the whole dilemma that sometimes they just don't know why the models do a certain thing just because of machine learning, because of certain patterns that the model recognized. So I guess in that sense, it makes perfect sense to have a technology that helps us explain the process or grasp the process in a much better way than humans ever could.
Yes.
But then again, is human expertise still essential, and which part of the tasks can we not let the tech solve for us?
Yes.
Which part of the task do we still need to solve ourselves?
So another really excellent question. I do not believe that AI can fully replace humans for the strategic tasks, at least not right now, and that's certainly not how I had built our company. I think that lawyers, privacy, data governance professionals need to spend time on strategic decision making based on accurate data and information. And one of the key issues that we've had to deal with is largely that we haven't had good data. We've had bad data. We've had bad data in and bad data out. That leads to bias, that leads to inaccurate decision making, and it makes the ability to make strategic decisions even more complex. So I believe that some of the tasks that can be automated, or data discovery tasks, are the uptake and maintenance of compliance documentation with human oversight in both cases, because that will continuously be absolutely essential. And to generally ensure that we can shift humans from the kind of administrative work that we were doing into more strategic related initiatives. So that's really our focus area.
So kind of a human behind the steering wheel type of situation where you have most of the groundwork done for you, but you are still the one in the end that has to make a decision, that has to,
Exactly.
decide how to interact with the information that is provided to the person.
Yes, and you hear Microsoft using the term co-pilot often. We have a privacy and AI governance co-pilot. So you can think of it as sort of your right-hand machine, if you will, who's going to continuously understand, explain what's going on in that technology environment, and then be able to maintain that for you so that you can make strategic decisions around it. And now I want to also address directly, Taya, that point on, is this going to replace jobs? So I do believe AI will certainly replace certain types of jobs. However, when you finally have accurate data, there are problems around corners that we never even knew existed. So for the very first time, we're going to get that clarification of exactly what's going on, what problems do exist, because we're looking at objective data. When you have wrong data that you're looking at, there's no way that you can make effective, objective decisions that will really be based in what the reality and the facts are. And if we are to really build effective businesses, effective privacy programs, understand how personal data is truly being used, it's so important that we have a clear understanding. And with, as I said, an AI renaissance, there's just no way a human can keep up with the many advancements with AI, with large language models, with data governance broadly.
I actually fully agree. However, then I would like to ask you another question.
Okay.
So the AI Act kind of introduces this idea of human oversight as well. So
Yes.
humans are important. Humans have to be behind the steering wheel and oversee what is going on in the models, with the models, what are they being used for.
Absolutely.
However, what I see as essential and maybe, well, it's certainly mentioned often enough in the academic circles, but not often enough in the actual normal people circles. How do we get the people to actually understand what is going on? Like AI literacy as a whole debate, like how do we get our
Yes.
human experts to actually understand the effect that these technologies and recommendations that they get and sheets that they get and whatever they get out of
Yes.
the model, how that shapes their opinion and how
Yes.
they are supposed to interact with it?
I really love this question for so many reasons, Taya. At the outset, lawyers happen to be very technology averse. It's as though when you start to talk about source code or a database, we shut our brains off, and somehow there's some fear of technology. I have seen it happen in conversations. It's some level of insecurity that I think the legal community has. We have to change that. So if you're asking me from a kind of systemic, social aspect, how we can change that, one way is learning computer science early, even as part of our law school education. I highly recommend it. I mean, they don't even teach how to build a spreadsheet in law school, which is kind of mind-boggling. But I think it's absolutely essential that everyone gets a baseline understanding of computer science. So I think from an educational perspective, that's one really key area. Barring that, and let's say that you've been practicing for some time and you didn't necessarily have that level of understanding of computer science, of AI technologies, of ML, then I think that you can rely on experts who you can trust, who can explain this information to you. And then barring having direct access to those experts, I think the criticality is getting access to technology that can simplify things that are happening in the technology stack such that folks that may not be engineers, software engineers, or computer scientists have that opportunity to distill the information in a really digestible format. And that's one of our key focus areas as well.
Okay, so it's one thing getting the tech to do the right thing,
Yes.
getting the humans to do the right thing. And then maybe to wrap this section up, how do we get the people to actually care about these questions? I mean, they're having the tech that does half of the job for them, great. We are aware that we can have automation bias, but we don't really care because the system does half of the job for us.
Sure.
So how to get this culture of legal compliance, and this is something that is especially interesting when data protection is concerned, because it concerns all of us, but
Yes.
somehow when it's other people's data, people tend to care a lot less than if
Yeah.
it was happening to them. So I guess how to build this compliancy and privacy awareness, AI awareness into, a company's DNA, basically, because that's where it needs to be.
Right. No, I totally appreciate the question. And let's be honest, this is not easy, especially when we feel like we're in a space race of many different sort of big tech that I see regularly in Silicon Valley, as well as startups that are trying to leverage some of the technology that's available through open APIs capabilities. They have released their APIs. I mean, people are building new models on various versions of GPT. We are seeing this explosion. And when you are building at the speed of light, how do we ensure that companies begin to take this seriously? I don't know if I have all the answers, and that is the truth. Having worked with many different technology companies, I was at Cruise. Well, they were building an autonomous vehicle. Today, we heard some of the regulators talking about the absolute need to collect consent and allow data subjects to extract their data. When you are collecting all kinds of data, and even beyond the autonomous vehicle itself, if we think about just, we're filming now, the individual is passing us by, their data is being collected. How do we continuously ensure that we're getting consent in such cases? So I think we need to be thinking about the practical implications of building privacy and security controls into how technology is built from the outset. And something that's really been top of mind for me, particularly because I work in AI, are these black box models, where often we collect data, we are engaged in data scraping that goes into the data set that is feeding into our LLM, and then we don't, and even the engineers themselves don't necessarily know where that data has gone. So I think we need to understand from a practical perspective what implementation of the AI Act actually means. But do I support that we do need some way of understanding how to regulate this industry while not hindering innovation? Absolutely. And I think so long as there are frameworks, there's education. I tended to buy my engineers a lot of pizza and feed them Aperol spritz, just to make sure that we're able to build relationships. So I think for any privacy council who are listening, I think it's really about that cross-functional departmental relationship building. That's absolutely critical, because the engineering team or the sales marketing teams that you might be collaborating with, they need to trust and have confidence that you're not just trying to stop what they're doing, but you're actually working as a team, because everyone in the end is trying to build a business together. So really trying to be seen as a business partner instead of a business blocker. You never want to be seen as the department of no. You want to be seen as, let's collaborate to find real solutions. Because the worst thing that can happen if you are a privacy council is that engineers just say, we're not going to do it, and they don't listen. And then that doesn't get anyone anywhere, right? And that's exactly where we don't want to be. So I think having that open dialogue, educating people on the importance, and making this not about compliance, which is generally a term that I feel a little allergic to. It's really about trust. Why are we doing this? It's ethically the right decision. And I like to kind of use the New York Times test. So let's say that we had some kind of issue and this became public. What would this look like on the front page of the New York Times? How would we be thinking about it? And I think if we can get more into that mindset, that can really help to generate support for a privacy and data governance program and better relationships and buy-in across the organization.
So many things to clinch on there. I'm getting really distracted from the New York Times test, which I absolutely love as an idea. I think it's great. All up to pizza that we are definitely getting after this.
Oh, yes.
So Aperol is here for aesthetic purposes, but pizza is going to be here to make sure we have our strength back. But the point that I'm going to clinch on is actually going to be the one you mentioned straight at the beginning, when you mentioned all the open source technologies used through various APIs that the companies using them often don't really understand fully, which open up a whole lot of security issues.
Indeed. Yes.
And this is something where legal tech comes in, well, as critical, as essential, not as handy. It's like mandatory. Everything from code scanning to various threat modeling exercises performed with adversarial algorithms, adversarial attacks. So maybe give us a broad overview of security threats, security modeling, and the role of AI in helping us fight threats.
Absolutely. So I agree totally that with the adoption of new AI technologies within organizations, this is posing security risks that we just have not seen before. We need to be very thoughtful about this, and I think it's critical that we have a regular understanding of what's happening in our own code and how our code is interacting with third-party code, open source, and otherwise. This is precisely why I wanted to found a company around code scanning, because that ability to understand what's happening on a continuously monitored basis is critical. It's only when we can fully understand, continuously scan, and really have an understanding of what's going on in our environment that we can stay on top of security risks and other issues that new AI models may pose, like bias, for example. So, and I think we'll talk about that today as well, a really important consideration. So I think that continuous monitoring is key. What's also key is to understand not only what's happening in your environment, but what is supposed to be happening in your environment. You need to set a rule set around whether it's the EU AI Act or contracts that you may have in place with your customers. How can their data be used for training? This is one of the most hotly negotiated commercial issues right now is, are you using my data to train your models? If you're in any B2B transaction, this question certainly will come up. And it's really critical that you have a great answer for that, and particularly as it falls under the EU AI Act, because this raises questions of copyright. It raises questions of, if you don't have traceability back to where the data sources actually were, are you able to even use that? And then when you're extracting this information, have you really run a security assessment against the type of technology that you're going to be embedding into your stack? I think these are all very critical questions. And again, we were talking to you earlier about some of the sort of assessments and paper exercises. Paper is important, but a real understanding of the operational reality is critical. You cannot be operating without that. So that ability to understand exactly what it is that you're procuring and how it's going to work in your product, what data it's going to have constant access to, how it will generally interact, particularly if you're adopting LLMs, and then what is that original source of data. So the EU AI Act for high-risk processing does talk about being able to map back to the source. And I think that companies are moving so fast that we are not always doing that in Silicon Valley. I mean, I think that's just generally the reality. So we need to be thinking about, can we actually trace this back? So there's traceability and explainability. Can we explain how this was built? And really having that understanding, I think, is critical to not only protecting the personal information involved, but generally mitigating some of those security risks.
Right, and you tackled on multiple points here. So we can use different technologies, we can use different tools to, well, monitor different parts of the process, because the threat can come from the training data, it can come from the model itself, it can come from fine-tuning data, it can come from the back end where people are trying to break our model. So we have threats all around, and
Yes.
we need to monitor what is going on in the model. We need to make sure that we did our due diligence with the training data sets, and we can have technology help us automate a lot of it.
Yes.
And now I know we wanted to talk about bias, and bias as a security threat, to be more specific. So this is, I have to admit, a quite novel idea for me, first introduced by you 2 days ago. So I would like to hear some more about it. What do you mean by bias in this context?
Yes.
How can it be a security threat? And, well, probably the most important question, what can we all do to fight it?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And honestly, I'm still exploring some of the additional security risks. But, it occurred to me that as we talk about bias, we're often thinking about it in the context of gender, of race, of sexual orientation, and otherwise. Not having a diverse representation can absolutely lead to additional security threats. One of the main ways. If we are so focused on particular threat actors coming from a particular group or even nation state, then we may be ignoring other potential threat actors that might be coming from within that we never suspected. So that's one of the most obvious ways that I can think of bias, not only in the respect of those sort of three categories that I mentioned, but also potentially with national and cybersecurity risks. So having a diverse representation, I think, is critical. Also, the folks that are building the models, and we can certainly talk about this in more detail. There's a lot to say on this, but the training data matters so much. And you will hear AI engineers say, well, it's not us, it's that the training data was biased itself. So with Siri, for example, there's a reason that folks that have an accent and women had a harder time for many, many years, and I think still to some extent do, having their voices understood by different voice recognition technology. Why? Because who was providing the data set? It was a lot of men from Silicon Valley who had a very particularly similar profile. And when you constantly have these same types of training data sets, what it leads to is this inability to fully understand different diverse viewpoints and to create a product that works for everyone and not only a particular group of individuals. Now, if you think about that in the cybersecurity context, so I had mentioned one area, which is because of bias, we actually might miss opportunities to identify additional threat actors because we're just so focused on one group. This also might lead to additional false positives or false negatives because of the biases that might be embedded into that AI model. So if you think about it, if we only think that a particular group or ethnicity or gender does a particular thing, we might be not open to considering that actually those groups, ethnicities, genders, or folks of a different sexual orientation or different nation states are actually capable. So it might lead us to be focused on the wrong types of threat actors. I think in addition to that, it's also a matter of just getting objective data so that we are not focusing our efforts in the wrong places, because there are only certain limited amounts of time in the day, limited human capital, and it's so important that we focus on kind of the right areas where there actually might be some kind of risk. And if we don't actually know, for example, that this is a particular threat actor, this is a particular group where we should focus, we might be focusing our time and attention on just the wrong group altogether. And that can lead to other security threats that we had not considered. So I think these are just some of the general areas around why bias goes beyond some of the kind of traditional ways of thinking. I do not think it's a separate issue from security and privacy. I think these are all very much intertwined.
Interesting point of view. And I mean, bias has been a topic for a while in this sphere with, scientists like Timnit Gebru from Google speaking loudly about it and then, getting pushed aside because she spoke a bit too loudly about it. And then we also have the same company doing things like their Gemini bot being intentionally super diverse to the extent that it changes American, Senate history and the history of Germany and stuff like that. But then switching this, well, I wouldn't say a narrative, but switching this problem and this mindset. We already have a certain awareness that this is a problem, but just considering this problem in all contexts and looking at an AI system holistically and not just, generative AI and what type of content do we want to produce, is definitely something that companies could work on. And then again, being transparent with what you are doing and why you are doing certain things can, in my personal opinion, always only help the situation. If
Absolutely.
That's actually where your New York Times test might come in handy. Even if something happens, if you can explain why you did that and it ended up badly, but you were trying your best, I think it's always a better sign or a best practice type of action.
I completely agree. And to your point, that's explainability. We have to be able to explain what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think that does pose this sort of philosophical question to Silicon Valley. If we can't explain it, should we be doing it at all? I think this is really something we need to think about deeply. Because at the moment that we kind of lose control of the understanding of what we're building and what we're doing and why decisions are made, then we may have some real ethical challenges that need to be addressed.
That's one other point that I love. Looking at explainability in a broader sense, not just explaining what the algorithm does, but explaining these strategic decisions made by humans based on AI systems, or not based on AI systems, just strategic human decisions.
Yes.
We also need to be able to explain those,
Yes.
besides from the fact to we need to be able to explain what our models are doing in the first place.
Yes.
And now this leads me to an explainability question in your career path. So we kind of mentioned a few companies that you worked for. You worked for Workday, then you were Chief Privacy Officer of Adaptive Insights before they were a Workday company.
That's
and
right.
then they were kind of acquired,
so went back.
Workday, but not really. Then you also already mentioned GM Cruise, so working at a company that actually develops autonomous vehicles is like a privacy nightmare or a playground.
Privacy
I'm not
opportunity,
sure.
I think.
Opportunity.
Privacy opportunity.
That's how I see that you have the startup founder mentality. Explain the decision to actually switch from your one would say highly successful, prominent position career, and to go back into the trenches and fight to build something that you needed when you were in those positions.
Thanks for the question. I do think you have to be just a little bit crazy to want to start a company, to be honest, especially during a pandemic, because that is exactly when we got started. This was a problem that where a couple of things were true. One, I had seen it repeatedly with every one of my clients. So it was always hard to understand what data we had, who was accessing the data, what was done to it, and keep that holistically maintained. It was always a challenge because the ways in which we were doing it, even when we had gold star privacy programs, was very manual. It was time consuming, it was inefficient, it was causing a lot of challenges with the engineering team. So I saw this repeatedly. I'm just across the board with my clients, with folks in the industry, just across really the entire privacy community at large. So that's one. I knew that this was a large problem. It wasn't just me experiencing it. It was actually lots of folks in privacy. And I don't really think...
I can vouch for that.
Yes, it's difficult. And we want to do our job strategically, effectively. We want to be basing this, again, back to the question of good data sets. But we didn't have that ability to do so.
Or I don't want to use Excel spreadsheets to do that.
No, I mean, this is a very old way of thinking, and it's time to move forward into the present. Two, it was a problem that I knew I could solve because I had experienced it myself, and I had a vision for how Reliance could be built that played out just like a movie. It was just, if we can build a data map immediately, the privacy team can come in, see that map, and then make strategic decisions. Once we have that observability of data, that is absolutely critical. And then three, the market was ready. We really didn't have an alternative solution. And, I think if I had found great technology, I probably wouldn't have been incentivized to do this. But in my heart, I've always been a builder. I've always been building things. I built a law practice. I built privacy programs for companies, sometimes who had nothing in place. And I was the first privacy lawyer, actually repeatedly. And so that type of just building something from the ground up and taking on important challenges, especially when this feels to me like one of the most important social issues of our time. To manage how the world's personal information is processed as we go through an AI renaissance, I can think of no more important role than maybe other than climate change or doctors that are helping during a pandemic. But for what my skill set was, I really wanted to work on building something that had a social impact and can really help to kind of assist companies that had the same pain points that I did. So those are some of the reasons why. And I really want to leave, kind of a legacy of having helped organizations understand what they were doing with people's information, whether or not people understood the importance of protecting their own data. I think because of history and some of the things that we've seen over time, there's a reason Europe has some of the strictest privacy laws in the world. This is so critical. So it's an honor to have been able to be a founder and to be a part of this.
And I mean, I'm going to guess that you haven't regretted the decision because Reliance is now 5 years old.
You're
still at it.
Yes.
You are going to various conferences in Europe,
Yes,
trying
we're
to
expanding
figure
into
things
Europe.
out. And so apparently it worked out well. But maybe to give our listeners a bit of context, so the two of us met in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, maybe
Yes.
1 or 2, I'm not even sure. Time is flying at the moment.
Time is flying at the moment.
Time is relative. And so we met in Brussels at a Women in AI Governance event.
Yes.
And so, as we said, you're a founder, you are definitely in AI, and you are definitely a female. And you also happen to
All of
be
the above.
based in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, which is probably like the tech bro sanctuary, or at least it looks like that from the outside, but I might be slightly biased there, I don't know. But do tell me some of your experiences. How do you feel as a female founder in the tech industry? How do you feel as a female founder in AI? Just anything that you can share with me and anyone listening to this later about your experiences.
Yes, so I do think, just given the data around how many women get funded in Silicon Valley, we see 99% of funding going to male founders and only 1% going to female founders.
Which is actually ridiculous. I learned that at our Women in AI Governance event, and I'm still processing it. 1%.
1%. And so we have some real challenges in Silicon Valley, and at the same time, I feel really fortunate that, my company was funded. So I'm so grateful for that. But is it true that we do need more diversity in Silicon Valley, that we need more representation? 100%. And I think that it is a question of having more women involved in technology and elevated to positions of leadership, which has been a big focus of mine. But until we start to make real decisions about representative data sets, I think that this is going to continue to be a challenge until we make real decisions about hiring and representation, across our technology companies. This is going to continue to be a challenge. So the question is, how and when do we change that? And there's not an easy answer. I think we've got to be aware of the problem. We have to continuously present the data in a really objective way, and just be cognizant that gender and racial, sexual orientation diversity is actually good for business in many ways. It will help to mitigate security risks. It will help to offer diverse perspectives and ultimately lead to better products. So I think being really data-driven about it is so important. And once you see the data, you will see that there are actually tremendous opportunities for folks of these different groups to be involved. And yeah, as far as my founder journey, I mean, it's been a journey, Taya, I'll tell you. There are good days that you will have your best day ever and then your worst day ever, and then sometimes that happens on the same day. So it's just a matter of, I think, being able to pick yourself up no matter how many times you kind of get punched in the face, and it happens quite a lot as a founder, and just kind of brush it off and keep going. I think the resilience piece of being a founder is something that I really appreciate, because you just keep going no matter what happens, and it doesn't work out, and you get a lot of no's until you get to one yes, and then it's that one yes that can actually make tremendous opportunities for you. So I'm so grateful to our initial customers, for example, that really took a bet because they didn't know if it was going to work. And I recall one of our first deployments with one of our customers, and we had tested, we had done everything that we needed to, and suddenly they had a data map built for them in a matter of minutes after we did the integrations. I didn't know if it was going to work. You kind of just hold your breath and go, is this going to work as well as it did in our testing environment? And then when it did, it was one of the most magical and rewarding moments that you ever had. And so to see your vision of kind of bringing together automation and having a technology co-pilot finally executed in reality is probably one of the best feelings in the world.
That is something that I haven't experienced myself, but it definitely sounds relatable from the way that you tell it. But yeah, I mean, to start off with my comments on the whole women as founders and women in the tech industry, I mean, a huge part of it is also changing this narrative that you can't do it as a woman. I mean, having the data is one thing. And hearing 1% of women get funding can be extremely disencouraging. Like, you hear that and you're just like, okay, well, I'm obviously, there's lions like you, but most women will be like, okay, well, I'm obviously not going to be that 1%, so why try? And that is also why I'm super glad that you agreed to do this with me, because
It's my pleasure.
I want to have the voices of the females that did it, so that we can start working on that narrative and
Yes.
putting the data into perspective. Having the data is important, but also having the exceptions to the rules is even more important, or at least equally as important.
Yes.
But then I'm so glad that you switched to your journey as a founder, because that's precisely the point, right? The journey is that of a founder, regardless of the fact if it's a he or a she or something in between.
Right.
They're all founders and they are all building something, and when that thing works, that's a great feeling, as we heard from you. Then maybe a bit of room for marketing. So let us know, what does Reliance AI actually do, and why is it so special, and why is that the thing that you were missing? So
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for the question, Taya. So we have really focused on building a holistic opportunity for organizations to automate many aspects of the privacy and AI governance program creation. We are also offering DSPM related solutions, so that in addition to having observability of data, we have this ability to really define a security posture. Because ultimately, why are we building a data map? It's not just to tick a box under GDPR and say that we did. We're doing that to protect our information, to secure it, to ensure that we're giving data subjects the rights that they deserve. Now, one of the key reasons, which I alluded to when we first got started, that I wanted to build a company, was to get that understanding of what was happening in the code level. Code is where engineers make decisions about data. Now, it's a really interesting and unique way of looking at it, because traditionally we have considered that data privacy is about data, personal data that's being processed. But my philosophy is that if we are at the personal data level, we are too late to actually do privacy by design. Because before we collect data, there is actually code written. So if we are to really build holistic privacy programs, it's absolutely critical that we understand what's happening in code. So that's our primary focus. If you can understand the code, you can understand your environment. So we have 4 key integrations, and the reason for this is that in addition to SaaS companies, you have all types of other companies. HR and recruiting companies, biotech companies that might be using clinical trial data, hospitals, healthcare tech, that's a real focus area for us. In addition to the SaaS companies that will have built their own source code, they're all using code in other dimensions. So our first integration is to embed at the code level. So to the extent that we can really embed, understand what's going on in source code, we focus there for SaaS. Now, if you're a company that doesn't build your own code, you are probably using third parties. I mean, if you are any functioning business, there is code somewhere, and if it lives in code, we can identify it. Now, of course, we have legacy data, so data lakes, data warehouses, data stores, where information is living. Now, we can scan that as well and integrate with third-party API connections. And then with that, we continuously understand what's going on from a metadata level and what your legacy data might be. So that'll give you an understanding of what's going on in the past. And to stay in the present, we will continuously extract metadata from APIs and other areas. Then we integrate with infrastructure monitoring technology. So this is technology that engineering and security teams have been using for many, many years. And with Reliance, what we do is really embed as an application performance monitoring tool. Within your stack, we extract information from the APM tools, and we're able to put that into the holistic understanding of your technology environment. And then finally, one of the key integrations that we have, because we don't have, it's not, as we talked about, just the operational reality, it's also what are the requirements. So we have those legal requirements, the EU AI Act, we have the GDPR, of course, CCPA and CPRA, and your contracts and policies. So we will integrate with your contracts and policies and use AI to extract provisions and then feed that into how we understand your environment. So now we have our North Star against which we can compare that operational reality of what's happening in the technology environment. Now, if there's a disconnect, and this is why I was saying, I believe AI, at least in our case, will create more jobs. Because once you understand what you're supposed to be doing as your North Star, and you compare that against what's actually happening, that actually opens up a whole host of issues at the organization that lawyers, privacy, security professionals should be solving. So that's really how the technology environment works. And I guess the second part of your questions is, what problem were you really solving? And there were a few. So one was keeping an up-to-date data inventory and map, automatic generation of some of the administrative documentation, whether that's your records of processing activity for your GDPR Article 30 requirements or your assessments, and keeping that ongoing. Because one big challenge I had in-house was if something changed, I didn't always know unless the engineers proactively came and told me. How are lawyers to know? We do one assessment and we think that the product and technology lives like that forever. That is not how software engineering works. It is constantly changing. Code is changing. The way we build is changing. The products are evolving. So we need that understanding of what's going on in the technology environment through a scanning technology, which we have built, in order to really automate the creation of that mapping, inventory, and those other administrative pieces. So that's the real focus area. I could probably continue chatting, but that's kind of a high level of the company and how it operates.
Love this. So we are looking at the code, we are looking at the data, we are looking at the infrastructure, we are mapping everything, and we have our North Star, our goal system of how we want it to work, and then the only thing we can ever do is trying to get closer to that North Star.
That's it.
But if we don't understand the three critical components, then, well, we might as well look at the North Star. We are not getting there.
That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with me.
Thank you.
I know that you are a very busy person that has been doing a lot of meetings from Venice between sessions with your people that are still in the US. You are also leaving us soon, and by us I mean Europe, and going back.
I am returning to San Francisco, as hard as it is to leave this beautiful place and wonderful people like yourself, Thea. I will definitely miss it, but I will be back soon. We are absolutely expanding into Europe, and it's just been wonderful to build connections. The Privacy Symposium has just been phenomenal, and I've met some tremendous folks here. So it's going to be hard to leave this beautiful setting, but yes, I will be back in San Francisco next week.
Well, we are also sad that you're leaving, but this also is a perfect place to wrap up, because we want to make sure that you enjoy Italy a bit more before you have to fly back.
Well, you've treated me to an Aperol Spritz, so I
Which
think
we haven't
this is
touched because we are still talking, and there is so much more to talk about. But as I said, it's important to leave some room for enjoying life, enjoying Venice, vita lente, and we better attack that Aperol Spritz and have some food in ourselves, I would guess.
That sounds good, Thea. Wonderful.
And yeah, thank you once again for doing this.
Thank you.
I think that wraps it up for our special. It was a very special at a very special location, special guest, no Peter, and not me ranting about the news updates, but I'm going to do that at some point, so you're going to get that as well. So really glad that we did this, and see you all next time.
Thank you.